we're still captivated by the age-old dream of being able to fly. Using no power save the movement of the atmosphere, these most minimal of aircraft now offer undreamt-of access to the sky. They have revolutionized our ideas about flight and offer newfound freedom to anyone who's ever nurtured the dream of exploring that great bowl of heaven. Since earliest times, people have dreamt of flying with the birds, in unison with nature. The latest hang gliders now soar better than seagulls, and improvements in performance continue to be made. Patrick Béraud, one of France's top free flight pilots, once said that we should fly bare-chested like the birds, using our hair instead of feathers to better feel the air.
I think in our society we're used to not to be responsible of ourselves. We live with many rules, many conventions, many things, and we're not really responsible about what we're doing. The others are responsible, the government, the other people, the job, the society, the family. And I think when you fly, you learn something that's very important and very different, is to be responsible about your life, responsible about what you're doing exactly at the second you do it. You're the only one who knows which speed you need, how to feel, how to move.
Bertrand Piccard has been flying hang gliders for more than half of his life. At the same time, he's a child psychiatrist by profession and loves flying for what it teaches him of his own internal world. The quest for powered flight began with aviation's early pioneers taking to the air in foot-launched, weight-shift-controlled gliders, hang gliders. Otto Lilienthal, the most famous of those original birdmen, remarked, "The time has now come to mate the wings of the mind with material wings and fly." More than a century later, there's been a resurgence in interest in these minimalist aircraft that has encouraged not only the continued refinement of new generations of hang gliders, but also led to the development of an entirely new aircraft, the paraglider. People can now learn to defy gravity in a couple of hours, and do so under highly modified parachute canopies that have all the aerodynamic properties of true wings. Hang gliders and paragliders have together altered the face of sport aviation by offering anyone between the ages of 17 and 70 a chance to fly unencumbered by the cost and regulations of mainstream aviation. Current developments all started with the modern hang glider, which originated as a steerable parachute designed by NASA scientist Dr. Francis Rogallo to bring back re-entering spacecraft from Earth orbit. In the 1960s, people began to experiment with hanging beneath these simple Rogallo wings and launching themselves off hills. Russ Potter and Pete Scott were the first to introduce these to the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England in the early 1970s.
Making my eyes water. Look at that sail, it's like a load of washing.
And again, his unique signature, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Well, the notes I can recall on the sheet of paper I got with my glider, there were two sheets of paper, I think. One was how to rig it and the other one was how to fly it. And the bit about flying was that you pointed it into the wind and you settled it so it was just off the stall and you ran. And as you ran, you pushed the bar away. And when your feet were off the ground, you pulled the bar back, but not so far as you would crash. Suddenly I recall on that first flight, I was up in the air about 40 feet up, I couldn't remember the bit about coming down. The other sentence, I hadn't got to that bit really. And in Compton Bowl, as for there, a day's flying would be about 8 climbs up the slope and 8 glides down of about 10 seconds, by which time you're exhausted.
It was the quickest way of getting a divorce or losing a girlfriend or, you know, whatever. When hang gliding started, this, you know, the second phase really, you could go to NASA and you could get all the technical details that you could want to get you to the moon and back, but you couldn't get a thing about low speed flight, 14, 16 miles an hour. There wasn't just nothing in the computers about it at all. So we were really starting back again from square one where they left off in about 1908.
Now we open the wings.
This third generation Regalo represents a halfway stage in development terms between the crude Delta and the modern twin-skinned high-performance machines. Considered state-of-the-art in the early 1980s, its gliding performance is only half that of the modern wings. It still finds good use today, however, as a flight
Get into the
trainer.
habit of hooking into two. Screw it up. Right, now if you just drop down, put your hands on the bottom bar there and just let your whole weight be taken on the harness and just hang there for a minute. Right, just get a feel of that. Push the bar away from you. Right, that's feeling the nose come up, that's going to slow you down. Pull the bar in, and it'll bring the nose down, speed you up. Go to the right, make the right wing go down, and to the left, bring the left wing down, that steers it to the left. Okay, we'll stand up now, and we'll give it a flight. Down, pull out! Pull out!
Although it takes only 10 minutes to learn the basics, it can take many weeks to accumulate that from flights that last only 2 to 3 seconds.
The first time I flew the hang glider, I remember very well, it was during schooling, so when I was taught to fly. It was just maybe 10 meters, and I remember very well when the harness just pulled me out of the ground, and I really felt that the moves of my arms on the control bar were making the turns. And this you can never forget.
But ironically, the continued development in hang glider design is now contributing to their fall from popularity. It is paragliders today that put simple low-speed flight into the hands of the average person. These featherlight flying machines can be carried around comfortably on the back and deployed within minutes to make flights lasting several hours. Their simplicity is attracting thousands of people who might not ordinarily have learned to fly. The paraglider offers an unrivaled intimacy with the air. You're just freely suspended in it. The pleasure comes from the sense of the wind brushing your cheek and the sounds and smell of nature that envelop you. It might be the burbling of a mountain brook or the sweet smell of cut hay in high summer. There's nothing to dilute the experience of being airborne. It's just you and the air, one on one. Under favorable conditions, these most minimal of aircraft have achieved heights of over 13,000 feet and over 8.5 hours have covered distances of up to 93 miles or 150 kilometers. But for those seeking maximum performance, hang gliders reign supreme. They've reached altitudes of over 21,000 feet and speeds of 90 miles or 145 kilometers an hour. The best among them are tested to withstand forces up to 10 G and can safely perform aerobatic routines. These machines can truly soar with the eagles. Although still based on the principle of the flex-wing glider designed by Dr. Francis Rogallo, modern hang gliders are essentially a new generation of aircraft. Using the latest ripstop nylon and mylar fabrics, supported on lightweight, high-strength tubular aluminium frames, they now sport classic wings with higher aspect ratios and double surface aerofoils. From their small factory on the Isle of Wight, Airwave produce some of the most advanced hang gliders in the world. Their origins as master sailmakers has given them a very useful background in all the necessary manufacturing expertise. The K2 being manufactured here is the latest in a line of high-performance gliders chosen by experienced pilots requiring the ultimate cross-country and competition wing. These gliders play an important part in Britain's continued domination in world competition. This trim control allows the pilot to alter the shape of the aerofoil in flight, maximizing performance at different airspeeds. Hang glider development continues to rely heavily on seat-of-the-pants testing, although one way of making these tests more scientifically reproducible and safer for the pilot is to use test rigs like this. Flexible structures like the surface of a hang glider wing behave very unpredictably, and so although the theoretical aerodynamic loads have been carefully calculated, nothing can replace a physical test to find out what's really going to happen in flight. The wing is tested to speeds up to 100 miles or 160 kilometers an hour. In the process, a continuous series of load measurements are recorded. The test program ends with an absolute load test, where the wing is stressed to breaking point. Aerobatic flying asks more from the glider and pilot than anything else.
What I have in my mind before the takeoff is really concentration on the technical part, because by that time it's maybe more technique than psychology. You have to prepare every part very good. You have to prepare your material. Everything has to be perfect. You cannot miss anything.
Bertrand Piccard is being particularly careful today. This will be his first flight since experiencing a near-fatal crash a year ago. When doing a loop, his wing ruptured in mid-air.
Then, during the time we're going up under the balloon, I think it's the worst part of the flight, because there's nothing to do. You know, the technical is already done, and the flight is not yet come. I always ask to myself why I'm doing that, because I could be sitting very quietly on the ground, just looking the balloons flying in the sky. Well, I started to fly with hang gliders 17 years ago, and I went on all the steps, you know, normal flying and night flying and two-seater and altitude, and each time I wanted something more strong, you know, to be more, to get more awareness of what you're doing, to get more the conscience of the 3 dimensions and of your body moving in those 3 dimensions. And this really, I got it with the acrobatic. It's something that I didn't find in other sports, that I didn't find in other way of flying. No engine, just one wing, and you move your wing in the 3 dimensions of space just with the weight of your body. And finally you forget that you have a wing, you just fly like a bird. Well, you are so much present to yourself, so much aware of what you're doing, that you don't have to protect yourself against anything. So you feel your emotions, you feel what you're thinking, you feel what your body is doing. You don't have a mind who is controlling a body, you have everything working together. We are in a materialistic society who has many qualities, but the problem is that we forget ourselves. We try to escape, going always farther and farther and faster in the technology, on the computers, but we are losing the meaning of the man.
The roots of paragliding go back to France in the mid-1970s, when a number of intrepid alpine climbers thought they could use the new generation of steerable parachutes designed for skydivers as a way of avoiding slow and difficult descents from mountaintops. But it took 10 years before people realized that these chutes could be developed into real wings and be made to fly for flying's sake. A glacier makes the perfect launch point for a 1-hour flight into the valley below. The pilots look to gain altitude as fast as possible, making sure that they don't stray too close to the bare rock faces, which are now generating a lot of turbulence. A few minutes later, they steer for the valley and begin the more tranquil journey down. These wings are the latest design of Laurence Kalbermatten, a Swiss, who was the first to build a commercially available paraglider in 1985. The Magister has a wingspan of more than 39 feet or 12 meters, but is extremely narrow, giving it a total area only 2/3 that of other leading wings. Flying in the face of current designs, which are working towards continuously larger surface areas, the canopy is surprisingly stable. This unusual wing is exploring an area of aerodynamics not yet fully understood, and shows that paraglider design is still only in its infancy. The village of Verbier in the Romanche Alps is a mecca for free flight enthusiasts.
Richard, qu'est-ce que ça dit la météo là?
Ouais, je crois que c'est assez fort aujourd'hui.
Tu connais le coin là?
Ouais, le décollage est bon, c'est orienté nord-ouest, c'est excellent là.
This sleepy little village is an ideal place to be introduced to the delights of paragliding. The valley is relatively sheltered, and the surrounding ridges offer perfect takeoff points for virtually any wind direction. Over 100,000 people in Europe alone now practice the simplest and perhaps purest form of flight. Does this finally mean that aerial sports could challenge tennis and football as a major leisure activity? Or is the sky going to remain forever the domain of the more foolhardy and adventurous among us? The appeal is obvious. Freedom. The freedom to do your own thing with a minimum of restriction and regulation in an over-regulated world. The freedom of flight, as pure, surely, as it will ever be. Ironically, because paragliders are so easy to fly, many people do so without proper instruction. The results have been disastrous. These are not toys or parachutes, but aeroplanes, which can only be flown safely with a proper understanding of flight principles. Following the explosion of interest in the sport, there's been a worrying rise in the number of serious accidents, many of them fatal. Paragliders are, after all, aircraft like any other, and require as much detailed knowledge of meteorology and airmanship as any other form of flying. Under proper instruction, however, students can be in the air by the end of their first day. Now on day 3, this group are ready to make a short valley flight. Once they've accumulated 15 flying hours, they'll be ready to begin learning how to use thermals and start out on their first cross-country flights. Paragliders and hang gliders operate on exactly the same principles employed by traditional gliders. There are two main sources of lift: thermals and ridge lift. Mountains usually provide the best thermals. But you don't have to fly a paraglider from a high place. The chalk cliffs of the Isle of Wight provide a perfect spot from which to ridge soar. Here the lift is provided by the action of the sea breeze on the cliffs. Although these paragliders will never make great height gains, they can stay airborne for as long as the wind blows, and that could be for the best part of the day. The pace of development is enormous, with new innovations, both major and minor, coming monthly. Computers and laser cutters are employed in preparing the cloth, but from then on, the manufacturing process relies primarily on the skills of the seamstress. There are still many unknowns, and all the big manufacturers have active research and development programs going. Being such simple structures physically, experimental modifications can often be made, tested and where necessary taken on, or abandoned in quick time. This is the last area of aviation where the test pilot still puts his life on the line. The pilot deliberately deforms the chute. Should it take more than 2 seconds to reinflate and stabilize, it's considered unsafe. After an initial set of tests, chutes are often returned to the factory for alterations to be made before being tested out anew. The tests provide important safety guidelines to manufacturers in this burgeoning new industry. It's not only the canopy that's being tested here, but the harness too. Well tuned to its canopy, the harness plays a large part in how quickly a canopy recovers from major collapses. At 3 years of age, Gaël Amar has more than 100 paraglider and hang glider flights behind him. He's one of a number of sky babies from the village of Verbier who are growing up completely at home in the air. Perhaps we're seeing the birth of a new sort of person, a future generation of true birdmen.
Ok, petit bonhomme, derrière moi. Il est bon le bas? Ouais? T'es sûr? Tu fais comme s'il n'y avait personne là. Hein? Là. Voilà. Voilà. Ok, on va y aller là, hein? Oh là là, regarde, tu veux là. Voilà, bravo! Parfait! Hein? Hop là! C'est bien, hein? Voilà, c'est carré.
Voilà, monsieur.
Compared with hang gliding, I think this is a much improved, certainly for beginners, totally different sport. Easier to get going once you've mastered this business of getting the canopy in the air. It's delightfully slow to fly, and if the wind's light enough for a beginner like me, very easy to put down on the ground. People would be flying in half a day comfortably here, whereas if you were hang gliding you'd be 3 or 4 days before they let you off on your own. Once in the air, it's pretty easy to control, only having a couple of hand grips to steer left or right.
Lean forward.
People have been trying for at least 2,000 years to get airborne by throwing themselves from high places, with minimal success. The answer appears to be deceptively simple. Essentially, an aeroplane in a bag, The paraglider has in a few short years drawn thousands of new people into the world of aviation, because it's the cheapest and easiest form of flying there is. It has blossomed into the nearest thing to flying for everyone that the world has yet seen.
I think that flying was always the dream of man. Some people will go to the paragliding because it's easier and it's lighter on the back to climb a mountain with. Some other people will want more.
I think it's the purest form of flight. It's nearest to the birds we shall ever get. I'm now 65 and on the outside I'm 65, we're 103 on the inside, which makes it hard work. But apart from that, it's great. I do it every day.
Get your hands up again, hands up. Bit of right brake, bit of right. Draw down nice and smooth, that's good. Okay, I think you're flying. Right, just hold the brake handle down. That's lovely.